So today we're going to talk about taking full advantage of your LinkedIn profile. There's obviously a lot of things you could do on LinkedIn, a lot of things, and they keep adding more and more components, features, capabilities to empower job seekers, empower businesses to take full advantage of the professional networking platform. But we're going to hone in a bit on your profile. And before we dive in, I'd like to do a very quick introduction about myself. Tiffany kicked it off. So as she mentioned, about 16 plus years in tech recruiting across a broad range of roles, from junior to executive level, across a broad range of technologies. Lately, I'm very fascinated with product management, product design, cybersecurity, data science, AI, and cloud arenas. But I've really covered the gamut with a variety of employers. And then in the last 3+ years, running my own executive search firm. So yeah, it's been a great stint. Before I was a recruiter, I graduated from Carnegie Mellon in '99 with a bachelor's in information decision systems. I thought I was going to be some superstar consultant, management consultant. I actually joined a consulting firm right out of college. And I was so gung-ho, so excited. And, about a year into it, I was totally distraught. I had I didn't know what I was doing there. Like, no, this is not me. I don't want to do this anymore. So I had my own kind of quarter life crisis coming out of college. We've all been there, all done that. Many I've spoken with so many hundreds and spending hundreds of hours with candidates across these couple decades, and I've learned so much that we all share some struggle in our career path, but there's nothing like the struggle of seeking a new job opportunity, making a pivot in our career. So I did that, and I learned a lot from that experience. I'm very, as hopefully you can tell, even though I run a recruiting business and I really have to focus on serving my corporate clients, I'm particularly passionate about the candidate journey. As I mentioned, I've struggled with it myself. I've seen so many others struggle with it. And I really care a lot about helping and shaping candidates, helping them to better position themselves and elevate their profile and get the opportunities they deserve. So with that being said, on a personal front, I have a beautiful wife, 2 amazing precocious daughters that keep me pretty busy. I made sure that they were tucked away downstairs so they don't bother me during this presentation. But yeah, it's been a really amazing journey. So diving right into it, let's talk a little bit about what's going on, right? And keeping in mind that COVID has really accelerated and expanded these challenges and problems candidates are having. It's a very, very competitive landscape, as many of you may have experienced yourselves. What's going on from a macro perspective? There's just not enough, right? If you're a candidate, if you're hunting for a new opportunity, there's not enough inbound opportunities hitting the typical tech candidates inbox, right? Whether those opportunities are coming from recruiters or employers, not enough, of those in-mails, those connection requests that give you that thrill, that excitement, that, oh, here's a perfect opportunity for me to dive into, and they're inviting me for that opportunity. Not enough interviews, even if we're applying for a whole host of roles, even if we're applying to these recruiters, we're just not getting enough interviews. And what happens is not enough interviews that decreases the chances of getting offers, right? So we want to build a funnel. If you're familiar with the sales funnel, it's very similar for the candidate side. You want to build a funnel. The more opportunities are in your qualified opportunities are in your inbox, quality opportunities are in your inbox, the better the chances you have of getting interviews. The more interviews you have, the better chances you have of getting offers, right? So that's the kind of funnel we want to build for ourselves. And even if we're getting a lot of hits from recruiters, a lot of interest and excitement from employers, it may not be the right kind of roles, right? Something is off in that we're getting, you're a tech lead and you're getting junior developer positions. Why is that? You're a data scientist, where you're getting data engineering opportunities. And I'm not really into data engineering, more on the data science side of the world. Why is that? So understanding those dimensions are really important, so you get the right kind of roles and you're not getting frustrated in that in hitting that wall. You may even find the right roles, you may get enough opportunities, but it's not the right kind of companies. You want to work for a high growth startup, but instead you got Fortune 1000 companies running after you. Oh, I've already been there, I've done the Fortune 1000 thing. How do I get startups to be attracted to my profile? Vice versa as well. So that's that's a very common struggle for so many experienced candidates. And then not getting enough access, right? You're not having the opportunity to engage with the decision makers of the roles, of the jobs that interest you. How do we get those decision makers to be excited to engage with us, right? So this is very broad, obviously, and a bit generalized, but it's I'm running into this, one of these issues on a pretty routine basis when I talk to candidates, and some of you or most of you may resonate with this. What's the price we pay for not having resolved this struggle, right? Less job satisfaction, less pay, right? You're not getting the right job, and you're not positioning yourself for that right job because you may not be so excited for it, or whatever number of reasons. You're not getting what you deserve for the skills you bring to the table, for the experience you bring to the table. Because you're not getting the right kind of opportunities, you're wasting a lot of time, and it's creating fatigue, right? And it's a very, very normal very normal complaint. I've talked to candidates, I've talked to executives who have applied for 200 plus roles. And I'm talking about CFOs, CTOs who've applied for 200 plus. I recently spoke with an experienced product designer who applied to 600 plus positions. Can you imagine the kind of time and investment that's required? Yes, you can, because many of you may have been in those kind of situations. And that necessarily, for most of us, results in an emotional drain, right? The drain of the effort, but especially of being declined or rejected. And for many people, what's worse than being rejected is being completely ghosted, right? And the emotional impact that happens when that takes over us, when we are excited about a position and we're pulled through the process, or we're invited to a process, and then all of a sudden you hear crickets. It's a real draining kind of thing, and it happens a lot. The negative impact on a resume for taking a role out of desperation, right? You finally found something, it's not the perfect role, and you're not excited about the company, but you decide to kind of just do it because you're not getting the ideal position, on your plate. So you take a position, all of a sudden you realize that, man, this does not look great on my resume, right? And another price can be, the longer it takes to get a job, the harder it is to get a job. The best time to hunt for a job is when you already have one. Actually, Tiffany and I were just chatting about this, that this is definitely a worthwhile knowledge for those people who are actively job hunting. But even if you're sitting pretty in a job for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years plus, you never know. I can't tell you how many candidates I've spoken with who thought they were so secure sitting in their positions for 20 plus years that they would never be downsized. And here they are, asking for my advice on what to do, because they didn't keep up with the times, and they didn't keep their profile up to speed. They kept declining opportunities to engage in conversations with recruiters, and now they're climbing up a very steep hill. So these are some of the things that happen if we don't deal with the head on with some of the struggles and some of the issues of the job hunt process. So one of the big challenges that so many people face are dealing with this multi-pronged kind of gatekeeper model, that a very inefficient recruiting process in this day and age exists, right? And this has been there for a very long time, and all the AI in the world and all the advanced technology and emerging technology in the world has not really changed and evolved this, unfortunately. Recruiting is still operating in a bit of a traditional model, and the gatekeepers, whether we like it or not, are recruiters and technology. Sometimes it's just the technology, sometimes it's just the recruiters, but more often than not, it's both, right? The technology can be a job board, it can be an applicant tracking system, it could be all types of platforms that are coming out this day and age for recruiters to leverage to access targeted candidates. And what you end up having to do, and many of you may have already experienced this, is that you got to play a lot of keyword bingo with your resumes, right? You got to figure out the right things to say, the right skill sets to mention, just enough so that technology grabs your profile, it filters you in instead of filtering you out, and that's kind of name of the game for the modern day resume, or LinkedIn profile for that matter. And then on the other end of it are recruiters. If you cleared the technology hurdle, then there's a human who's going to look at your profile to determine if you're worth further conversation or two. And whether you like it or not, and I'm going to say this very frankly and very honestly, there are a lot of bad recruiters out there, and you may have had this experience. I'm sorry if you've had this experience. I've had this experience, but there are a lot of poor recruiters out there. And not just a lot of poor recruiters out there, there are a lot of decent recruiters and good recruiters out there who are beyond overwhelmed. They have more positions than they can handle. They have more candidates that they can handle, and they can't really give your profile the attention it necessarily deserves. So are you dealing with poor recruiters, or are you dealing with good recruiters who are struggling to keep up, right? So this is what you're dealing with, and this is very, 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 very important for you as a candidate to recognize that these are the challenges in front. These are the roadblocks that you have to pass through somehow, right? These are the gatekeepers, right? And you somehow or other have to understand what they're going through to make sure that you foolproof your profiles, your private and public professional profiles as effectively as possible. All right. So that's really, really important to keep this in the front of your mind, the middle of your mind, and the back of your mind. And as I was mentioning, the applicant tracking system is there, LinkedIn profile is there, but that's just tip of the iceberg. I shared this image with you to let you know what recruiters like me, especially headhunters, but now even corporate recruiters like me, are using on a regular basis. There are all types of new technology ecosystems we use that you'll never hear about to access your candidacy and access your professional experience. All types of LinkedIn automation tools and new types of databases you'll never heard of, like Seek Out and Hire Tool, and Amazing Hire and LinkedIn Helper. There are all types of new platforms that we're building, and I'm actually going through so much tool fatigue right now as I'm looking to enhance my own tool suite and technology suite in my own business. So there's a lot out there that we use to filter you in or filter you out. So there are things that, and a lot of that touches LinkedIn. A lot of it touches, if not all of it, touches LinkedIn. So your LinkedIn profile is not just something that some recruiter is just randomly hitting upon. Your profile is coming up in database searches and those database searches may yield 100, 200 to 500 relevant candidates for a particular role. So that's the context you're dealing with. So the real problem, okay, the real problem here, the heart of the problem, yes, we talked about the technology piece, but the real heart of the problem in the end is that recruiting is still a very human endeavor. It's still you're still working with human beings who can have bias, who can have who can have a lack of experience in understanding your world, who can have a lack of context. There's just endless number of filters and that are impacting a typical recruiter that can affect how they perceive your profile and your candidacy. So from a recruiter's point of view, right, there's generally, and again, I'm generalizing here, but 4 kind of reactions they'll have when they look at a profile. They open your LinkedIn profile and they're like, okay, I get you. I understand you've laid it out really well. It's clear, keywords are there. The job titles sync up. I get you, right? It's clear. I can move on. I can decide you're the perfect fit, or you're a perfect fit for not this opportunity, but for some other opportunity, whatever it may be. Or it could be, I have a sense of what you are and who you are and what you're about, but some things have creeped in to leave doubt, right? Either there's not enough information, or it's too much of the wrong kinds of information. You're just not telling me a clear story, right? So I think I get you, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm iffy on that. Or it could be, I don't get you at all, but you've played the keyword bingo game pretty well, and so I may invest a little bit more time in your profile because I have a little bit more time for whatever reason, or I'm desperate enough. I'm working on this role for 6 months now and I can't find the right candidate, so I may go ahead and invest, or I may just move on. I'm fickle about it, right? I'm not sure. It depends on the situation. Or the worst case scenario is, no thanks. you really, I have no clue what you're going for here. You've just confused me to no end, and I have no idea how you fit. So I'm going to move on, right? So this is a typical scenario when I have a profile in front of me. I'm making quick judgments. How quick am I making those judgments? And you may have heard this before. The average recruiter, okay, they did this study a couple years ago. In my opinion, this number is even less today. Okay, the average recruiter spends 7 seconds on your profile. What does that mean? That means that sometimes recruiters will spend less than 7 seconds on your profile, and sometimes they'll spend more than 7 seconds on your profile. But the average is 7 seconds. That's not a lot of time to make a judgment on you and your candidacy, right? For an opportunity that could be ideal for you, that could be perfect for you. And I want you to think about this from another perspective. Is this the real problem, right? Is the 7 seconds the real problem? Because is implying that spending more than 7 seconds, is that the real kind of solution here? Is that what we're going for? I can tell you that when I'm desperate for a great candidate, I have spent a couple minutes on a profile, right? More than 60 seconds even on a profile, to really dive in and to really understand it. And then on the flip side, I've spent 2 or 3 seconds on a profile on someone who's a perfect match. I could tell right away that this is the perfect fit. I don't have to drill down here. Let's move on and shortlist this person and engage. So it's not so much about the time. It's about the quality of the time that they're going to spend there. Yes, sometimes someone will invest the time in your profile, but you don't want to bank on it, right? You want to make sure that you lock them in as quickly as possible. So what can you control in this situation? We talked about the technology, talked about the recruiters and how they're gatekeepers, and there's so many other circumstances going on, right? There's so many things you don't know. It's a total black box. And so what can you actually control? And this is something I have to remind candidates a lot. Remind them pretty often of this point that is fairly obvious, but you also be surprised how locked in you get into dealing with something and pushing through that you forget that what you can really control is you. There's so much out of your control, but the things you can control, you should do very, very well, right? Because there's just so much not that you just won't be aware of. There's so many contexts you won't be aware of, but the context you can control is yours. The story you can control is yours, right? And I know this is hard because the reality is we've all been trained in our respective fields: data science, engineering, programming, recruiting, whatever it is, we've been trained in. But what they don't really train us very effectively on and very well is positioning ourselves, right? Taking our best experiences and putting them out there in a way that attracts people, that creates a narrative, that builds a story. No one's trained us to do this. And instead, what ends up happening is we lose track of our own narrative, and others dictate what our narrative is. And then what ends up happening is you get pigeonholed, right? You get judged very quickly, negatively, because you have not taken control of your narrative. What ends up happening is someone's going to fill that gap. The viewer is going to fill that gap and pass judgments on your profile, whether just or unjust, because you haven't filled it with the right story, with the right perspective of your experience and your trajectory in your career. So it's obvious that you have control over you, but what's not so obvious is many times, subconsciously or consciously, we don't want control over ourselves because it's honestly, it's work. It requires an investment. And that's why we're here, for me to help you understand that making an investment on LinkedIn is worth your time. LinkedIn is the most dominant, whether we like it or not, and many times I don't like it, but it's the most dominant professional platform on the planet. They now, I'm not sure what the latest number is, but I think they now have 800 million global profiles on the platform. So what's going on? Let's dive again. I'm sorry, I know we're not diving into the LinkedIn profile just yet. We're almost there, but this context is so important, right? It's so important to understand all of this so that you create a profile that matters to the viewer. All right. What's going on in a typical recruiter's mind? Why do they only spend 7 seconds on average on a profile? Why do they have so many biases? Why do they have so many struggles? When you're a perfect fit, why can't they recognize that, right? They're dealing with time struggles, right? They just don't have enough time in the day. Because I can tell you, there've been days when I've had my homework for the day was to review 250 profiles in one day. That's a lot. And it's a very mind-numbing task, right? It's a very mind-numbing task because you're seeing the same profile over and over and over and over again. After profile number like 30, 40, they all start to, like in your own mind, they all start to blend together. I got to stand up, I got to walk around, I got to freshen myself up. So recruiters really, are very pressured. They were pressured when I started tech recruiting 16 years ago. It was high pressure. Today, it's next level. COVID has just accelerated this pressure. So time, volume, right? There's just so many more needs out there, especially from a technology landscape perspective, that even if recruiters are willing to invest the time, there's just, an average corporate recruiter is probably dealing with anywhere from 25 to 35 open requisitions. And about 80% of these requisitions probably have anywhere from 50 to 200 applicants. What to speak of the proactive sourcing that they have to do to target the right kind of applicants. So this is an insane volume that we're dealing with. Lack of training is another one. Unfortunately, because of the low barrier of entry for a typical recruiter to enter into recruiting, many recruiters don't get the kind of training they need to vet a quality candidate. They don't know the difference between exceptional data scientists versus a lackluster versus an entry level, right? Many times they can't understand those distinctions. So that also affects their ability to determine if you're a perfect fit or not. Experience. Sometimes you just need the years under your belt to know what is what, right? What is exceptional, what is average, and what is below average. Mindset, right? You may have all the skills, but you just stop caring, right? Recruiting can be a pretty brutal industry. Recruiters get a lot of slack. You see it on LinkedIn, a lot of people complaining about recruiters, and I don't blame them, right? Poor experience from a assessment point of view, from a vetting and interview and engagement point of view, from ghosting. There's just so many problems with the recruiting industry, and I get it, and I resonate with that. So it nonetheless, all of that wears recruiters down, and whether it's justified or not, they don't always carry the right mindset. And it's not just because of candidates. Many times employers are really putting an intense amount of pressure on recruiters, more than they probably deserve or can handle. And so that affects how they're approaching their job on a day-to-day basis. Targets, right? Are they, again, this has to deal with the pressure and the volume and combination of some of these things. Do they have too many aggressive targets on their plate? If they do, they may be taking a lot of shortcuts, right? They may decide to, I'm just going to review. I've heard this from experienced 20+ year recruiters. I only look at the first 20 applicants. The remainder, I just ignore, I just move on, because I just can't deal with it. I have 15, 20, 30 other roles I got to deal with. And finally, competency. It's again tied to training, experience, but have they been do they have the right skill sets to understand a technology profile, the right skill set to understand a physician profile or another type of profile, right? So these are just some of the challenges and that affect a recruiter's filter and mindset once they open their applicant tracking system, once they open the job board, and they're looking at a typical resume or a LinkedIn profile. So your job is to make it easy to figure you out, okay? It's to reduce the cognitive load of recruiters, right? They're dealing with an insane amount of cognitive load, and it gets harder for candidates who have very diverse work experiences, who are making pivots in their career and transitioning, because now the onus is on the recruiter to figure you out, right? So and to piece it all together, and that's fine, right? We're ready to do that. Your job is to make that as easy as possible. So what does this mean now from a LinkedIn perspective, right? How do we make a recruiter's job easier to digest? We're again focus on LinkedIn. A lot of these principles apply also to the resume. That's a different webinar for a different day. But from a LinkedIn perspective, and I'm telling you, I'm a technology recruiter. I have about 20+ roles right now in my portfolio, and I spend majority of my time sourcing on LinkedIn, all right? So I'm looking for you on LinkedIn. So what's important on LinkedIn? What's important for you to understand from a candidate perspective is the bias pyramid, okay? So what happens on a typical LinkedIn profile, and we'll get to one right now in a few minutes, is on the top, you have your banner and you have your profile photo. Then you have your name, and then you have the headline under your name. This section is prime time real estate of your LinkedIn profile. You gotta nail this section. This section matter. These three components matter a lot. There's so much conscious and unconscious bias built in. Soon as I see that part of your profile, right? It's hitting me in ways that, on so many dimensions and so many layers. So it matters so much what you say on the top of your LinkedIn profile. What I call the section is above the fold. I don't know if any of you are familiar with, with the days of physical newspapers, right? Some of you may still have access to physical newspapers. Most of us today, we get all of our news through the internet, right? And through our phones. But back in the day when physical newspapers were the thing, if you were a journalist, you always wanted to be above the fold. What was that? That was front page above literally the folded part of the newspaper. If you were there, that means you were prime time. That means what it meant was your article was meant to really excite the reader to lift it up, open it, and keep reading. So that's what your job is above the fold on LinkedIn, is for the recruiter to look at your profile and say, yeah, this person, I want to invest the time to scroll down. I know I have 50, 100, 200 other profiles I got to look at, but man, this person really reeled me in, and I'm ready to scroll down and unpack this person's experience and make sure that this person's worth the investment of reaching out to. All right. So that's the goal here. That with all the pressures of the recruiter and everything, your job is to get me locked in within the first few seconds. So how does this happen? I'm ready to showcase my profile, but I wanted to put it out there. Does anybody want to volunteer their profile to be thoroughly examined by me?
Yes, please.
Do we have a victim? I mean, a volunteer who's ready for grilling?
I think Ritu, you volunteered, right? And also John is raising his hand. So do you have time for two?
All right. Please put your profile in the chat if you don't mind.
Yep, 1 sec.
Sharing this one. So whoever puts their profile first gets to go. All right. Let's see here. Thank you. Let me just. Okay, we got. So let's first deal with Helen. Sorry, just give me a minute. Just taking a second here to get to LinkedIn. All right. Thank you, Helen, for volunteering. All right, let me just share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we have here Helen Ross. Thank you again for volunteering. What do we got here? So first things first. As a recruiter, what do I notice the first? More than anything, we gravitate towards images, right? And so what are we gravitating to? Towards Helen's photo and her background banner image. And I've got to tell you that I like it, right? The banner image, it's cool, it's funky, and there's a bunch. There's a lot you can do there. All right, there's a lot you can do there. You can just have a nice wallpaper type of image, or you can have something that reflects your passions, your interests, right? Reflects your work style. There's so many things you can do and create. and put up there that can actually convey a lot of subconscious subtext to the viewer of that profile. And so, again, you don't have to necessarily read too deep into it, but you can if you want, and it can have a very interesting subconscious impact on viewers. The one thing I will tell you when it comes to images is that when it comes to your profile image or your banner image or any kind of visual on your profile is, especially with these two, is I'm not going to hire you or want to talk to you necessarily because I see a great image or a great profile picture, but I can definitely decline you and reject you if I'm unimpressed with what I see there, if it creates a negative impression. So this is an opportunity to create a potential opportunity to create a negative impression. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that at bare minimum, you're creating a neutral impression here. You want to make sure you don't put controversial things up here. You don't create any negative biases up here, because it will flavor you right away, flavor me as a viewer right away. Okay. So Helen has, in my opinion, from my perspective, has done a really great job. I get this very cool vibe, some fish, the globe and the planet. And, I'm getting this vibe that, Helen cares, right? Helen cares about the planet. I mean, that's the impression I'm getting here. All right. Now we jump to the profile picture. So now my eyes are shifting. All right. This is all happening within a matter of like 1 to 1.5 seconds, literally, before I scan my eyes down to her name and her headline. Your profile photo matters a lot. You want to be inviting. You want to be someone in that profile photo that, it has to be something. It has to be taken in such a way that I should be excited, or I should be kind of eager to want to talk to you. It should be welcoming. It should be engaging, and usually to create a welcoming, engaging profile photo, you want to spend the time and money to get a professional photographer to take your photo. I spent about $350 to get a LinkedIn headshot plus a variety of action images that you'll find on my website. But typically you can find professional photographers to do several versions of a headshot for a LinkedIn profile for around $150 to $200. It's worth the investment, because if you don't create a welcoming photo with the right lighting, wearing the right kind of attire, it can create a negative impression. I have seen profile photos that have created negative impressions, and I have decided to move on.
Hey Palak, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I, just a quick background. I used to recruit for Carnegie Mellon. I recruited at Carnegie Mellon for 12 years until a couple of years ago. Yeah. Just one thing I wanted to point out was there are rules that I think the OFCCP has put into place, where as a recruiter, you're not really supposed to take into account what a profile picture looks like.
You're not supposed to.
So yeah. Just giving everyone a heads up that as a recruiter, I have trained myself not to look at LinkedIn.
Yeah, but that's
my job applicant.
That's not the reality.
I just want to give a heads up.
Yeah,
it's not the best practice.
I appreciate that. That's not a best practice, but that's a reality.
I get it. Yeah.
And we're dealing with the reality that someone's hunting for a job. LinkedIn has created an opportunity to put a profile photo there, and there are literally thousands of recruiters like me that spend hundreds of hours on LinkedIn. And
I get it. I get what he's saying. All I'm trying to say is,
from a recruiter's point of view,
recruiters not to think
that bias should not work its way in, but it's there.
Sorry, I didn't mean to digress.
Yeah, so it's the reality. It's a valid point. 100% agree. We're not supposed to let that factor into our decision making on a candidate, but we're human beings. That's the point of the presentation. Like, and if an image is put in front of a human being, you're going to react to it, whether you want to or not, whether you acknowledge it or not. Subconsciously, it's going to have an effect. So if you do a poor quality profile photo, it's going to have an effect on some recruiters. All recruiters, no. Of course, quality recruiters are going to be like, that's fine. They didn't invest the time in a profile photo. That's all right. I really care about the experience, and that's all that matters. But where sometimes, the decision maker, the gatekeeper for ideal opportunity is a recruiter who has about 6 months of experience, and they're not going to be trained necessarily, especially if you're dealing with headhunting firms and whatnot. So we have to prepare our profiles in such a way that meet the lowest common denominator. Is that ideal? Absolutely not. Is that the way it should be? Absolutely not. But unfortunately, that is the reality. So these images matter a lot. I've heard many things from many recruiters as well, and I can tell you that they do make an impression. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars dealing with this. Get a nice simple background image from a royalty-free background image. That's great. Have a simple headshot done. If you have a great iPhone camera, you could probably have your significant other or a friend of yours take a nice simple headshot with decent lighting. That's fine. Or if you want to spend a little extra money, but it does make a difference. Now that I'm feeling good, I'm like, okay, positive impression, good. Let's move on. What your job is to create a snowball effect of positive impressions as a recruiter. You want to build on that bias pyramid. Now, bias has a very negative connotation, generally speaking, but it doesn't have to. You can create positive bias, and that's your job. You're marketing yourself as a candidate. You're a product, and you're marketing yourself. So your position, your job is to create positive bias. So you've done a decent job up there. So now what? Full name, Helen Ross, great. Sometimes people don't allow their full name to be presented. That's okay. Some people may like that, some people may not. But full name is ideal. And then the next part, all right, is really, really critical. Okay, it's the headline. In the headline, it's like your 3-second pitch, right? Again, you're selling yourself, you're positioning yourself out there to top employers, to ideal opportunities. And this is like the headline is almost akin to the email subject line, right? If you're a marketer and you're marketing something and you want someone to open your email because the real, the real juice, the real impact is in the email itself, in the email body. How do you get them to open the email? People are bombarded with emails all day long. Is you have to have a really great subject line. That's the secret to email marketing, having a really great subject line. So this is your subject line. You want to make sure that this headline conveys the full depth and breadth of not only where you've been, but what you're aspiring to, all right, and what you're aspiring for. The asterisk I would put on that is you, of course, have to be a little bit careful and mindful of your current employment situation. Let's say you're doing well in your job and you don't want to showcase that you're seeking new opportunities. That's fine. Then there's a little bit of word jugglery you have to do to really help yourself stand out, but at the same time, not necessarily raise any flags with your current employer. So that's kind of a nuanced element that we can get into at a later time. But generally speaking, your headline really needs to convey what you are about as a professional, right? For many people, I've seen many times people put their current job title as their headline because it really conveys everything that they're about as a professional, and it hits the mark for them, right? And that's fine. But many times it can tell the wrong kind of story, give the wrong kind of impression about what you're looking for next. You don't have to accept the LinkedIn default, right, of putting your current job title as your headline. As a matter of fact, if your current job title is not the job you want tomorrow, then you want to think very carefully with what that headline should be, right? So take a look at Helen's headline here: statistical capacity building at United Nations. So for me, if I'm looking for a really great statistician, I'm absolutely going to be interested in Helen's profile. United Nations it's a great, for me, it's a very positive brand, right? Everyone knows the United Nations. So she's leveraged that brand in her headline, right? And because I'm not yet sure exactly what role I'm looking for with respect to Helen, I'm not sure what to make of capacity building right now. But if I knew what role I was typically looking for, then maybe that would have more of an impact for me. But the words that stand out to me on her headline are statistical and United Nations, right? So if I'm looking for a really great statistician with a really solid brand behind her name, then I think I'm ready to scroll down. She's already created a pretty positive message for me here. But let's say for whatever reason, Helen is looking to be a data scientist, right? And not stay in the world of statistics, just for hypothetical purposes.
Not hypothetical.
Oh, it's not hypothetical. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. All right. So it's not hypothetical. So now, if I'm looking for a data scientist, all right, for, let's say, Helen, if would you be open to sharing what would be an ideal type of company? Are you looking to join a startup? Are you more interested in enterprise or nonprofit sector, or you're really flexible?
I'd like to do work at a healthcare startup doing data science. Yeah.
Interesting. So you want to join a healthcare startup doing
I've
data
always
science?
been fascinated by healthcare data. So
Interesting. Very interesting. So,
but I don't have anything health related on my profile, so that might be a slow pivot.
Understood. And are you currently employed at United Nations?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yes.
So they're not to be made aware that you're necessarily
Yeah.
seeking an opportunity. Very interesting. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and a lot of I work on a lot of international working groups, and so our partners will look me up on LinkedIn.
Yes, got it. Got it. So that's an interesting scenario. So one scenario is she is currently working at United Nations, and therefore she has to be pretty buttoned up in terms of how she presents herself so that she doesn't raise any flags. I totally get that. And in that scenario, I totally understand her headline. I may still scroll down, and that's when I'm going to care about the about section. Does that reel me in? Does that really sell me on her passion for data science versus statistics? And of course, we know there's overlap there. And if let's say I am locked in, then I'm going to scroll down and check out what she has to say in her experience section with respect to. Again, I'm looking for a data scientist. Does she really convince me that she is passionate about data science, right? So anyway, let's just stay above the fold for now. Let's assume that, Helen, you're not currently at United Nations. You're no longer employed there. You were very recently there, and now you're kind of, or you are there and you don't care.
One of my coworkers lost her job on Monday, so funding.
Understood. So let's in that scenario, if you have total freedom to write whatever you wanted on your headline, and I'm a health tech focused headhunter, by the way, and I have a few health tech clients, and let's say one of them was looking for a data scientist, and I came across a profile, would the headline reel me in? I'll be honest, not necessarily, because I don't see the health tech focus, because let's say they're saying they want someone who's really interested in healthcare, right? Or at minimum interested, ideally they have the experience. I'm not getting any healthcare vibes on the headline for me to say, okay, I have about 75 other profiles I have to look at, and I'm not really, feeling the love here from a health tech perspective. Number two is I don't see any mention of data science. As far as I'm concerned, you're interested in pursuing a career in statistics, in exclusively statistics, and not necessarily.
Can I? Okay, data science statistics is data science.
Yes, but
the Department of Statistics at Carnegie Mellon is basically data science. So as a recruiter, I would implore you to take a look at and understand what data science means without falling into the jargon for keywords.
So I'm just focused, Nikhil, for the purpose of this exercise, I'm just focused on her above the fold.
Okay.
So that's the focus here. So just looking at your headline and nothing else, and knowing that I have quite a volume of other candidates that I know will likely have healthcare experience, the headline doesn't reel me in.
Mhm.
One adjustment you can consider is including keeping some of these keywords, but including some other keywords that reflect more depth and focus on data science, because statistics is definitely a subset of data science. But this headline doesn't tell me that you're a great data scientist.
I work in big data capacity building.
That's amazing. Those keywords make a big difference, right? Again, we have to remember the context. If I'm dealing with multiple roles and I have hundreds of candidates to review, and I have only a few seconds to make a judgment call, am I going to make, what's the judgment call I'm going to make? And again, I may be totally wrong, right? The next recruiter may opt you in, but the next 3 recruiters may opt you out, right? Your job is to increase the volume of recruiters to opt you in, to make them feel like, hey, this person's worth scrolling down and investing more time. I'm not
Widen the funnel.
Yes, widen the funnel. So this is a goal. The headline is a golden opportunity for you to work in keywords. You can keep all of this, for instance, and there's still space for you in the headline. The headline can go 3-4 lines. So there are many other keywords you can work in that convey not only your professional passion, but maybe some elements of your personality, some elements of your hobbies that you're really passionate about, some dimensions of you as a person, right, that are really important to you. And these things can actually have a dramatic impact on a recruiter who's seeing the same type of profile over and over and over. Imagine, Helen, you are not my second profile that I'm viewing. You're my, 85th, right? I'm scrolling through profile after profile. How are you going to get my attention? Enough so that I want
already like zoned out on all of the information you keep seeing again and again and again. You need to like ping a different neuron in order to.
Exactly. So there's so much creativity there. I mean, their entire, for instance, for email subject lines, their entire multi-level course is available for marketers on what it means to write a really impactful subject line. It's so important in a world where we're inundated with information and content, and our inboxes are overflowing. How do you get someone's attention to click that and say, I want to unpack this further? Or, man, 50-50 statistical capacity building. Yeah, she's likely very, she could be a great data scientist, but why wouldn't I instead select candidates who are explicitly telling me that that's what they want, right? Mm-hmm. So and again, I'm dealing with, I'm giving you the worst case scenario, the recruiter that's overwhelmed, that's undertrained, and that doesn't, and is just dealing with an intense amount of time pressure. There are plenty of other recruiters that will take the time and invest and say, hey, statistics, data science, definitely a lot of overlap. Let me scroll down. Your job is to increase your funnel and to also recognize that there are unfortunately a lot of underperforming recruiters out there that are standing between you and that great opportunity. So that's the focus.
Hey, Palak?
Yes.
What about the Oregon Health and Science University? Does that portray, healthcare at all, or?
So LinkedIn, to my understanding, does this automatically. They'll drop your latest degree, most advanced degree up here, and that's fine. For me, for the types of roles I've worked on, historically, almost never has a hiring manager told me that I really care about educational pedigree. Vast majority of hiring managers I've dealt with in my 16 plus years have told me that, degrees are great. If they come from great universities, that's awesome, but that's not the top priority. Experience matters more than anything. So I'm looking at this from a typical tech recruiter perspective, and I engage with so many other tech recruiters in my industry, and very few of them really care too much about the degree element. But yes, if it's a really great degree, it can make a difference.
I was more asking about like the health and science component, because you were saying that there's no.
Oh yes, that's
healthcare above the flip,
I'm sorry,
but
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
that could affect. Again, typically, I'm gonna, how do we usually read, right? We read left to right, typically. So if I just have a few seconds to make an impression, I'm going down, 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 boom, boom, boom. I may scroll over here and my eyes may wander over here. But again, if I'm dealing with a lot of profiles and I'm gunning through them, I may not, right? So but it's a great point. She's mentioned health and science, so that could reel me in, but there's a chance I may miss it. And I may just be stuck here and just decide, oh, I'm exhausted and moving on, right? So that's kind of what we're dealing with. I want to take a moment to pause here. There's so much more to say about these topics, and yes, my perspective may not be everyone's perspective, but nonetheless, there's so many ways we can unpack this and so many different perspectives we can explore. But we are at 9:01, and I want to give Tiffany the mic back to see if we can spare a few more minutes, or maybe we can continue this in a future discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Palak, for your presentation and also walking through Helen's profile. It's extremely helpful. I did promise everybody a Q&A session, so if you don't mind like staying on for an extra 5 minutes, maybe we can take like 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Does anyone have a question for Palak?
I'll go if nobody else has a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned that, if you're looking to pivot, it can be difficult for recruiters to understand kind of where you want to go, or, what role you're kind of looking for. So what if, you are open to a multitude of roles, right? So just to give you some context, just so I think it's easier for everyone to understand, I'm currently an investment analyst at a hospitality investment fund, and I'm looking at, other hospitality investment funds and PE and other kind of, I'm looking at tech, for example. I'm looking at corporate development and strategy, basically, a bunch of different roles, right? I just want to see kind of what's out there. So what would your suggestion be for someone who's kind of open to, multiple roles, and maybe their profile is more tailored toward hospitality or real estate, but, you're open to, yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I have to, this is such a common question. It's a very common challenge, and it is a challenge. The unique opportunity with a resume is you can create multiple versions of your resume, right? For each type of pivot you'd be open to considering.
Right.
But the struggle with LinkedIn is that you can only have one profile, right? So what I usually advise candidates who and professionals come to me with the same kind of quandary is basically experiment. And I advise that in general. Even with headlines, you want to experiment. You want to try different keywords, try something for a couple of weeks. If it doesn't work, try something else. Maybe focus on industry versus skill set. Focus on skill set versus industry. Focus on, so add some humanity to the headline, whatever it may be. In the same, tone, you may want to target your profile. And again, this varies from role to role and industry to industry. There may be industries where, and unfortunately, I'm not as conversant with the financial services and investment landscape, but there may be industries that may be very open to people who are open to various kind of sectors and domains and industries, and there may be industries that may not be very open to that, and you may have to have a very dialed in profile for that industry, and then pivot to another profile that is dialed into another industry, a month later or 2 months later. So there's a bit of trial and error when it comes to LinkedIn specifically. The thing that gets a little bit, and Nikhil may have a different perspective than me because he's also a very seasoned, experienced recruiter. For me, when I see like too much breadth and not enough depth, it becomes tough to know what you really want and what you're really ready to dive into, right? So if you're very deep in a particular skill set, make sure that gets conveyed above the breadth of industries you're open to. But if you have multiple core competencies, so you're like you're great on the project perspective, you're great on the delivery perspective, you're great on, you may have multiple, you're a great leader, you're a great individual contributor. There's so many things you're great at, and you're open to both an individual contributor or a leadership role. It can, if you're dealing with recruiters having all types of pressures and time constraints, it becomes a little tougher to figure you out. And it's not that I can't figure you out if I invested another 10 or 15 seconds, but if I'm giving myself a time limit, then your bet may be better in focusing somewhere than focusing nowhere, right? That's my 2 cents on that. And again, the great thing about LinkedIn is you can experiment. You're not locked into your LinkedIn profile. You can adjust it in so many ways, shapes, and forms, especially that headline. So I would say have a bias towards focus than a bias towards breadth. Now, of course, there could be unforeseen consequences to that. You may feel like you're getting pigeonholed, and now you're getting all types of outreaches from recruiters in that industry, but not the kind of roles that you like, right? Okay, that's what's happening. Let me pivot. Let me change my headline. Let me change some of my context in my LinkedIn profile and see what results that leads to, right? So unfortunately, the best answer to that, with the limitations of one LinkedIn profile, is a lot of trial and error. And
Right.
I've said a lot, but not necessarily a lot. It could be just a few iterations before you hit something that meets the mark.
Yeah, that makes sense. The only issue with that is if I'm changing my LinkedIn profile every month, I think the employer gets a little suspicious.
Yes. That dynamic is always there. I totally respect that. And it does add a really big fat asterisk on my advice. So
Right.
it is something you want to be a little bit mindful of. So that's when you want to take a very, very strategic, guess on what will hit the spot, and at the same time, hit the spot in terms of reeling in opportunities that matter to you, versus raising any flags with your current employer.
Right.
But here's another perspective. And again, I'm open to different points of view on this. Is how often is your employer actually checking out your profile and tracking how much you're changing it, right?
Right.
I would say if you're changing it once every 2 months or 3 months, no one really cares. I've seen profiles change dramatically so often, like it's impossible to track. As a recruiter, I can't track what's going on with anyone's profile. I have thousands of connections, but let's say you're with, it matters more when you're with a smaller employer, and
which is the case.
Yeah, if there's just a couple dozen of you and they all know your profile by heart, then I guess it matters more than when you're working for like a Home Depot or something like that, right? So right. Or a Bank of America. It's definitely hard to track from that perspective.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, Jeff, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in people finding each other based on who they've worked with before, and I'm currently building a startup to try to solve that problem formally. What's your take as a recruiter on finding people based on who they've worked with before? Like if your client is Google and they want a data scientist, and can you get a list of who the data scientists on that team at Google have worked with before, and then see who's in their network and who might be 1 degree away from that, who's actually worked on a real team together?
That's a good one. I've never used that filter for myself. I'm going to use it now. You just gave me a great way to approach sourcing, but it's not come up for me. It's not been a request from my clients so far. In terms of, I do, where it may make some bit of an impact is in recommendations. So if I've seen that, I will sometimes, if I'm really locked into a great profile, I'll go all the way down to the recommendations. And for the life of me, I have no idea why they're at the bottom of the LinkedIn profile, but it's one of the greatest selling points. So, and there I'll try to pay attention to who's giving them, where they've worked, and how they work together, and that's where it can impact me. But from a specific targeting and sourcing perspective, that's not come up for me.
Hopefully it will within the next
it's a good one.
6
It's a
months
good
or
one.
so.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
John, you have your hand raised.
I think that was from before when you wanted to do the.
My apologies, John.
It was,
I get to your profile.
yeah, no, that's okay. I was wondering, is there any reputable service who can give the kind of advice you're giving? Like that we could actually reach out to? Is that something you offer?
Oh, it's a great question. I have decided not to stray into coaching. I've been asked many times, but I'm so overwhelmed with my own recruiting business. It's hard to find time to do the coaching. I really appreciate that. There are plenty of career coaches out there. I can't personally recommend any of them to you because I can only recommend a coach who's coached me, to be frank with you, or someone who said, someone I trust who said that I've had this coach and they're really exceptional. There is probably one person I can connect you to who I really like a lot, and he's a coach. He usually works with CIOs and CTOs, but I can definitely talk to him about engaging you if that's something you'd like, and he really has a great perspective. What I'm offering, I'm looking to eventually build into an online course, to be honest with you, and hopefully someday a book. That will lead to more seminars and webinars on these topics. But yeah, from a current state point of view, I can connect you to one of my contacts. Generally speaking, most people, I purchased a resume and LinkedIn profile service before, and they did not such a great job, to be honest with you. And therefore, after that, I never went with them again. And unfortunately, it's a little bit of trial and error with that. You got to just try a few people out, see if they resonate with you and are ready to go really deep with you on this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Stefano, you have a question?
Yeah, I have two comments actually. John, if you are looking for potentially a career coach, I recently used Upwork.com for freelancers. You can find a bunch there. I can't recommend. I'm currently using one, but I'm also doing the same thing as Palak, like giving it a go and just seeing how it goes. But the process was pretty seamless, and you get some good feedback, and you get a few ideas. So if you want to check that out, definitely check that out. The more important question though is regarding the recommendations. I think I've done a pretty good job at getting recommendations on my LinkedIn profile, and I wanted to get your feedback on that. Like, should I be trying to get more? Should I be trying to give out more? Again, I think I've done a good job. I think I have like 6 recommendations or something like that, and hopefully it'll be another 2 by when I leave my current employer. But any feedback on that?
Yeah, my feedback on recommendations is more the merrier. I have 22. I still think I have less. So more the merrier. You can't get enough praise. All right.
Okay.
So when it comes to marketing yourself, you can't get enough praise. So I would, and especially recent recommendations. So if, like I try my best to get 1 or 2 every year. So it feels like there's this flow of recommendations over the course of my career, over the course of so my recommendations go from my Infosys days when I was doing high volume recruiting, cutting my teeth at Infosys Technologies back in 2005, all the way to, I guess a couple of months ago. So, covering the course of your career, and sprinkle. So again, you don't have to go gangbusters getting 100+ recommendations. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's hard work getting recommendations, but if you can at least cover the breadth of your career, that creates a positive impression for me as a recruiter.
Okay. And how often do you think recruiters actually look at it? Because like you said, it's kind of at the bottom of the profile, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Good recruiters will scroll down.
Okay. So they're aware of it. Yeah.
Good recruiters who care, who are like, really, they may be either locked into your profile or debating your profile internally. Like, I see the right keywords, but man, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
but I'm desperate too. This role has been around forever and I really need to fill it. Then I will scroll down to the recommendations. I can't speak for others. It's hard to say how many really go all the way down there because it's really far down there. I have no idea why LinkedIn stuffs recommendations down. That's from my perspective, from so many other recruiters. Nico, maybe you can share.
Yeah, Nikhil, any feedback?
Nico, I think you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah. So when I was at Carnegie Mellon, I stayed away from recruiting with LinkedIn.
Okay.
Right? Because it takes you down a path where you shouldn't be going. You should be evaluating candidates only on their resumes and their application. Anything beyond that should not technically be taken into account.
Okay.
So for me, it was more about focusing on the candidates that have applied for the job. And thankfully at Carnegie Mellon, we got a lot of candidates that I didn't have to necessarily go on to LinkedIn or Dice or Monster or something, right? So it's a different philosophy of recruiting.
Okay.
So because technically you're not really supposed to look into these things.
Right.
So for me, the way I use LinkedIn was more around like what Jeff was saying. It's more confirming if someone has something that is irregular, right? So if you made a selection and you look them up on LinkedIn, is there something that's standing out either positively or negatively? So it's almost.
My only counter to that is the majority of recruiters don't operate.
They don't. This is my this is the way I was. See, I'm not an HR professional. I've got a computer science degree, right? I have no knowledge of. So I go by the rules that have been told to me by my colleagues at Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah, in a perfect world.
Right? So it's,
in my opinion,
I've gone through 2 OFCCP audits.
We would do it that way.
Right? So when you go through an OFCCP audit, and especially when so much of federal funding is on the line, I can't be responsible for doing something like this. Right. So that's just my experience.
Yeah. Okay. That being said, let's take a hypothetical, right? I print out, so the way I do things is a little bit different because I like to stand out a little bit. So when I meet someone with coffee or I'm, meeting with a potential employer or whatever the case is, if I'm meeting someone and I'm, they're asking for my resume, they're expecting my resume and cover letter, the whole shebang, I have a recommendations deliverable, right? Which is basically all my LinkedIn recommendations just copied and pasted on, Word document, and it's got my header and, information, et cetera, et cetera. And I often provide that as well. Nikhil, what's your opinion on that? Granted that,
I don't really look into the recommendations from LinkedIn.
Right. But what if I gave it to you as a deliverable, right?
No, it's great. No, that's fine. But I still won't contact them.
Okay. Gotcha.
Because I would still stick to the 3 references that we ask from you as part of our requirements for Carnegie Mellon, right?
Right.
We take 3 references. We're really not supposed to ask people through an informal network.
Right.
Because it's so contextual, right? It depends on who you reach out to and what context that, what is the reason that they either like you or dislike you. It's not fair for me to get into that.
Okay. Palak,
that's just my personal.
Yeah. Palak, any feedback on that? Giving like a recommendations deliverable just to reinforce that, you have recommendations.
I love them because it gives me, I need as much ammunition as possible. I'm speaking from a point of view of search firm owner. All right. And I have a client and that client's like, get me qualified candidates. And I see a great recommendation on, from a very seasoned, experienced professional on your profile. I will, if it makes sense, I will leverage it.
Okay. So take away the profile though. Let's say you're recruiting for me. I give you my resume, I give you my cover letter, and I also want to include my recommendations deliverable to you.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay. It doesn't come off as
practically, because I'm telling you from a typical recruiter's perspective, they want as much ammunition as possible to vouch for you. They want to vouch for you with the hiring manager because they want to close that role as quickly as humanly possible, right? So they can move on to the next role. This is the reality of 99% of recruiters. They want to move forward as quickly with the volumes that they're dealing with, especially when you're dealing with headhunters like me. So whatever ammunition you give me, I often ask candidates, beyond your resume, do you have any other collateral, case studies, or any write-ups, or any
Writing samples, yeah.
anything that you can that I can use to position you more impactfully, would be great, right? And that creates positive bias in your favor, and hiring managers love it, right? They're like, okay, appreciate this extra collateral. Right now, I'm working on a product designer role for my client. They're like, from now on, you cannot submit just a resume. We absolutely need a portfolio along with every submission of every candidate.
I agree with that. I think that's just a great strategy.
Yeah,
I think,
but that's an entirely different conversation. That's a different seminar. When it comes to creating that extra collateral, what does it mean, and the pros and cons from an effort point of view versus ROI.
Yeah.
And with that, I would like to wrap up today's event. Thank you, Palak, so much for coming today and sharing your insight. And again, thank you, Nikhil, as well, to just kind of speaking from your experience, like offering a different perspective.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so thank you for coming, and have a great rest of your night, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care.